Welcome to Resiliency Gardening. I'm Corey Ekman. I'm your homesteading graduate assistant at SRU's McCoskey Center. I'm here with Willow again, my trusty companion, if you can see her or not. Today's episode is going to be with the last frost date going to be on the horizon, as well as Mother's Day is coming up, and maybe she was your guru for becoming that resiliency gardener that you are today. So we're going to give light to that, as well as I want to show you things that you can direct sow after that last frost date, and then I want to show you how to harden off any transplants you did start to then later put into your garden bed. And then lastly, we're going to talk about flowers, in which you can plant some of them into your actual vegetable garden beds, as well as you could even plant them around your house for landscaping purposes. So we'll talk about that a little further, so let's dig in and stay tuned. In a past video, I showed you how I sowed my radishes, beets, carrots, and peas in this bed here, and I haven't seen anything pop up yet, but I'm still very hopeful because we've had some sour weather where it was snowing, and I didn't have the proper setup yet for combating things like frost, and so I will show you what that looks like later in this video of what I'm using to combat frost. But for some of the things that you can direct sow after May 9th, you can still direct sow those peas, radishes, beets, carrots. They're perfect to sow now, or you can sow them in a few weeks from now. And then a few other things that you can also plant would be things like arugula, lettuce. Some varieties do well still in some of the cold weather, as well as spinach and cilantro. You could plant a classic spinach right now, but the window will change shortly where it's going to be too hot for just a classic spinach, and you'll need to find a variety such as an Asian spinach that can be planted and tolerate the heat during the summer months, because often that heat will stress out a classic spinach and it'll just bolt. You can return to a classic spinach when you are planning out your fall garden. And that brings us to our last plant, cilantro. Some people love to hate it. I love to love it. The people that love to hate it think that it tastes like soap or like stink bugs, because there is a chemical it produces called aldehyde that is also produced in the soap making process and with stink bugs. So they think it smells bad or tastes just like it smells or whatever. But to me, I wouldn't have my salsa made any other way. Cilantro is the way to go. So if you're like me, definitely plant your cilantro now. And now these next few options are totally gardener's choice, whether you want to direct sow or transplant them. So we have lettuce, we have kale, and we also will have any sort of chard. So totally your choice if you want to start them inside or just direct sow them. Now if you'd like to and you haven't started these plants indoors to later then transplant, now is still a good time that you can do that, and you can still transplant after that frost date. So marigolds, zinnias, cosmos, basil, parsley, broccoli, and cabbage are all great options. So what it means when you're hardening off your plants is you take your transplants and you expose them to the elements for a couple hours of the day and increase it throughout a week's time. So if it's sunny and bright out like it is today, you may want to put them in the shade and then gradually expose them to that direct sun. And you also want to do it in the afternoon or in the early morning. You don't want that direct sun in that noon, high up in the sky sun, otherwise you're going to basically bleach your plants and cause the cells to just turn white because they're actually exploding, and all that hard work that you put into your transplants will essentially not go so great. Some of them can recover, but as soon as those plants turn white, you won't be able to. So ways to combat that, you can see I have a floating row cover. I also have a handy dandy worker behind me that helps me with my gardens. But I have this floating row cover, so then right now I have a few things planted under it, which I'll show you a picture of that. I have some cabbage and broccoli that can withstand being planted before that final frost, but just in case any frost comes in during that time, I'll have these row covers that actually keep it insulated, as well as it's a couple more degrees warmer in here, and then I can actually pull the row covers off and let the natural elements show to my plants for a couple hours of the day if I so choose to. And otherwise I can put away here at night, it's a lot better. So this is an awesome investment, super cheap too. I don't remember how much I paid, but it wasn't a huge investment. I got 50 feet of it in length, 8 by 8 feet across. So awesome thing to help your transplants to to then be able to go into a bed. So I'll explain a little bit more of that in a few pictures that I have for you. I just want to stress again how important it is not to skip the hardening off process, and I will describe that to you here again. A week before you actually bring them outside at all, you want to stop watering them, or at least really minimize your watering process, and then start to bring them outside for a couple hours in a shaded spot. Here you can see I was putting them on my porch, and for most of the day it is pretty shady on top of the porch. And then later I take them out and I put them on the stairs, but I do not ever let them be in direct sunlight during this week. And you just increase your hours and eventually you let them stay outside overnight, and just be sure that no rain or thunderstorms are predicted to come in, and bring them in every night until you're ready to actually leave them out there for a night. When you do get to the step of actually planting them into your bed, and you saw my setup of having a couple metal hoops and then this row cover, it's a little fabric row cover, and it keeps the direct sunlight out. It also keeps a lot of wind out and also some of the rain. It can still get wet in there if it rains hard enough. It can still get a little windy, and also the sun still comes through. So it's a good next step from being indoors and to not totally being shocked to the outdoors. In this section, I want to give you the breakdown about what I think about when I'm planting flowers in and around my garden, whether that's to amp up the pollination or add benefits for another food source or simply for aesthetics. And so I'm really looking for either native flowers or non-native, whether I care if they're annuals or perennials, or about companion planting, which I will give you the rundown now. I tend to prefer native flowers over non-native, simply because native flowers are adapted to my area and overall take the least amount of energy for me and also from the area to grow, while giving the most energy to native animals and pollinators. And that's not to say that non-natives cannot supply a good enough food source or anything like that. I definitely plant non-natives in my garden space like nasturtiums because they're delicious and I use them as a food source rather than feeding the wildlife. So make sure that you're taking into account what you're going to use your flowers for. The next thing I think about when I'm looking over my garden space is whether I need to plant annuals or perennial flowers. Now, it's totally up to your gardening style for which you choose, whereas something like a calendula, which is actually a perennial, so I'm tricking you here, but it is grown as an annual in this area because it's just, we aren't able to keep it alive year round. And so with this in mind, it just depends on if you plan to plant your flowers within your actual garden beds or within the garden space itself, or if you just want to use them as like a landscaping tool or near your garden beds to help pollinate and bring in those species that you want to help your garden out. And so with that being said, annuals are probably your best option if you're gonna put them directly into your garden bed. Or if you have an established type herb garden in which you have things that come back year after year, like lavender and things that can overwinter, then you can also plant other flowers such as black-eyed Susans, and which will come back year after year in your herb garden. So if you're more of a relaxed gardener and you don't have time or you can't be as hands-on as you would like to be, but still want obviously those pollinators to come in and help your plants out, then go for the perennial side of things, and you can still enjoy things year after year and watch all the colors grow in your garden space. The last thing I think about when deciding on flowers is if the flower can be a companion plant in my vegetable garden. Companion planting is when you plant several different plants together and they end up helping each other in the long run in a number of ways. For example, this Three Sisters garden of corn, beans, and squash, the corn acts as a support system to the vining plants below it, and they all add nutrients back into the soil in which the other plants take up the different nutrients from each other. Therefore, they're never really competing for any of those same nutrients, and it allows the gardener to grow an abundance of produce in such a tiny little area. Another example of companion planting in your vegetable garden would be if you planted peppers and basil next to each other. The basil is actually said to act as something that it increases the flavor of your peppers. And companion planting doesn't have to just be 2 vegetables together, 3 vegetables together. Flowers are an awesome companion plant, and here's more reasons why. One of the flowers that many of you may recognize, since you may have seen them planted around farmlands, are something called marigolds. Marigolds act as a good flower companion because they often deter pests from all of those veggies that you're trying to harvest, in that you don't want to have the bugs get to them before you do. Then you have your flowers like your zinnias or your cosmos that not only do they deter certain pests away from certain plants, they also bring in beneficial bugs that you do want to pollinate some of your plants, like your zucchinis and things that need insect pollinated to be able to fruit. So these are wonderful flowers and beautiful flowers to have actually in your garden space. On a final note about flowers, this one's got to be a gardener's favorite. This is our nasturtiums. They are not only used for pest control, they're also used to promote the health of other plants, just like the basil and the peppers, as well as these ones are edible. And so there are a variety of flowers out there that are edible. You can use them in salads and stir fries. These ones have a peppery taste, and they taste really good in salads and are very nutritious for you. So it's not only just vegetables that you can plant in your vegetable garden that are also edible. You can plant many types of flowers like this for medicinal or edible uses. If this idea of companion planting seems overwhelming, or you're very interested in doing this in your own garden, maybe you've never heard of it before, then simply do a Google search. You can type in, okay, what goes with my tomatoes as a companion plant, and you'll get a list of plants that do well with them, as well as plants that may stunt the growth of what you've been doing. So it's kind of interesting because maybe you had a rough year last year, and maybe it's not totally due to the plant itself, but maybe what was planted next to it. And for those of you that have signed up for the McCoskey Center's monthly newsletter, this coming May I will have an edition out that talks about companion planting, and I have a short list of different companion plants that you can also get the research from there and implement it into your own garden. And I also describe the process of making a raised bed and what that entailed. So I'll have those step-by-step things in which you can start to think about when you're putting together your garden. Today's final thought is a poem that I thought resonated with Mother's Day, and you don't have to be a mother to enjoy today. You can be a role model, you can be human. So today's poem is called My Mother Kept a Garden. And it goes, "My mother kept a garden of the heart. She planted all the good things that gave my life its start. She turned me to the sunshine and encouraged me to dream, fostering and nurturing the seeds of self-esteem. And when the winds and rain came, she protected me enough, but not too much because she knew I'd need to stand up strong and tough. Her constant good example always taught me right from wrong, markers for my pathway that will last a lifetime long. I am my mother's garden. I am her legacy, and I hope today she feels the love reflected back from me." So I love you, Mom. I know that you're watching, and I love all the other women in my life that have taught me to be the resilient woman that I am today, the passionate woman, the excitable woman that is very fortunate to have you all in my life, and I hope that each and every one of you get out there with the women in your life, whether they're your mother's friends, family, it doesn't matter. These women are all meaningful in their own ways, and I hope you can pay tribute to them, maybe plant some flowers together, and get out in your garden space. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you can subscribe and comment, send me pictures of your garden space. I look forward to answering any questions, so I will see you next week. Thank you for watching.
I have worked upon the hillsides where the pines sing in the wind, where the renters lived before me and the miners before them.